Nearly all of Taiwan and Japan's international data travel through undersea cables. These fiber optic lifelines don't just power the internet, they underpin financial systems, government and military communications, and critical infrastructure. But in recent years, Taiwan has reported multiple cable disruptions, including incidents linked to suspected sabotage, while Japan faces risks from natural disasters and accidental damage. We look at what's at risk and the real-world solutions being developed to keep these connections secure. Athena Tong, visiting researcher at the University of Tokyo. She's also Research Associate Program Lead at the UK-based think tank China Strategic Risks Institute. Great to have you in the studio with us, Athena.
Great to be here.
Now, Athena, with 99% of Japan's international communications going through these undersea cables, what would you say is the biggest risk for Japan if those cables were damaged or cut?
We have less of a gray zone area in regards to the maritime zones surrounding Japan compared to, of course, Taiwan, where you have a very aggressive neighbor who has been imposing their claim of sovereignty around a pretty large area of water close to Taiwan. Plus, Japan actually has been working on its strategic redundancy. So it's not likely that a huge amount of what is connecting Japan to the international world via submarine cables will directly be affected. They're not going to cut like 10 submarine cable systems out of the 20 plus international ones that Japan has. However, as we know, Taiwan and Japan, between the two of them, have quite a few international submarine cable systems between them. And when Taiwan has been implicated in, say, a contingency or a blockade scenario, it does affect Japan because even though there is redundancy, a reduction of what is available out of the 20 plus systems will affect speed. And with that, along with it, that means $10 trillion US dollars worth of daily transactions that rely on these systems globally. So Japan, given that it is such an important digital hub connecting, most importantly, North America and Asia, that does affect not only Japan, but also its neighbor countries that rely on Japan as a digital node.
So there's a massive knock-on effect. Now, if we go to Taiwan, and you mentioned briefly what the impact is and why Taiwan is so vulnerable, but what would you say is the biggest issue for Taiwan should some of those cables be damaged or disrupted, particularly with regard to Taiwan's economy?
So first of all, in terms of economy, of course, Taiwan relies heavily on a semiconductor industry. And this industry also relies very heavily on submarine cable enabled connection to the rest of the world because, as we know, for example, TSMC has its remote fabs in Kumamoto, but also in Arizona in the US, in addition to another one in Germany. So how do they coordinate between them? It is submarine cables. So ultimately, if these submarine cables are affected, that means delayed or perhaps no communications that allow for example, cloud services or the coordination between these fabs or within the supply chain that allows Taiwan chips to keep going about daily business, not only domestically, but also internationally. So the implications are huge, and I believe the estimation for the daily economic impact for Taiwan should the digital connectivity system be down is $55 million US dollars per day.
I want to break down a lot of the points you've made, but before we do that, let's take a look at Taiwan's latest cable security incident. Chunghwa Telecom reported in early March that there was a core break in the Taiwan Matsu No. 2 undersea cable. Authorities say they're investigating a foreign vessel that sailed near the area around the cable. Now, the Ocean Affairs Minister says an initial probe has not revealed evidence of malicious intent. Take a listen.
这几天断缆的事件，事后我们对于有可能有嫌疑，当然现在证据还不明确，不一定确定是他，但是只要是有嫌疑的船，有时候我们一个案，我们就会追2、3艘这样子。
Okay, Athena, as they've said there, they do not think it's malicious incident, but they are still investigating possible sabotage. Why is sabotage of Taiwan's cables an effective gray zone tactic?
Because first of all, the deliberate damage of submarine cables is not that easy to prove to be malicious. To start with, because it is a gray zone tactic, meaning there is plausible deniability. They can say that it was an accident because that is statistically what is most likely to be the case. Even though we know that there are multiple cases of maliciously intended damage or sabotage to submarine cable systems around Taiwan, especially since 2023, all the way to, well, last month, that doesn't mean that that is the majority of all the cases of sabotage around Taiwan Strait even. It is a matter of national security when it is intended and repeatable. So it is a gray zone tactic because of that, but also because it's a very low cost for malign actors like China or Russia to be doing this, but it has huge implications because they don't need to actually use military vessels. They have been using cargo ships or fishing vessels. They may not be functioning at their best, which is why when their AIS, their automatic identification system transponders don't work, they can just blame it on the vessel for being old or outdated or not complying by safety regulations. And that, of course, does not constitute a scenario where malicious intent is provable.
And therefore, you can't take action. Now, Japan's government now classifies submarine cables as specified essential infrastructure. Now, how does that help in their protection and also with regards to their supply chain management?
So Japan has designated submarine cables as such because Japan has introduced this Economic Security Promotion Act back in 2012, which was actually a response to the incidents surrounding Senkaku Islands, or perhaps as the audience better know it as Diaoyu Island. This led to the Chinese actually banning the export of rare earths to Japan, which led to the Japanese government to understand that economic security is extremely important and they should be protecting their infrastructure against any economic coercion, especially if they are relying on potentially malign actors that can hold it as a point of leverage for them. So under ESPA, as aforementioned, this means that the government will have purview over the supply chain of the infrastructure, meaning from the beginning, the research and development all the way to the production of cables, the cable laying, the repair vessels, etc. They will have purview into how safe that supply chain is because it is so essential to national security. But it will also give the government authority and as well as mandate to actually pour more funding and support into public-private partnership surrounding these infrastructures. So for now, there is still a bill in the docket in the Japanese Diet that we're waiting to be passed, hopefully within this legislative year, that will formally list submarine cables into the law itself. But for now, it has been categorized under the umbrella of, as you mentioned, the critical infrastructure category under the ESPA legislation.
From what you know, are they doing anything like that here in Taiwan?
Not exactly, just because Taiwan does not specifically have an exact legislation specifically on economic security. However, Taiwan did pass 7 laws very recently in Q4 of 2025 that protects maritime and submarine infrastructure, including the laws of the seas, which also outlaws the disabling of AIS systems. As I mentioned before, this is the system that identifies vessels. This is a very common tactic in gray zone warfare because we have seen ships with malicious intent to damage cables actually switching them off and then changing their names or changing their identification numbers so they look like they're another vessel, or they just disappear on the map for 2 weeks, but somehow they reappear in the same spot in 2 weeks.
Interesting. So Japan also has gone further and they've expanded landing stations on the Sea of Japan coast. They've also invested in the Far North Fiber project, I believe. Can you tell us how that gives more security to the cables and what the thinking behind that was, particularly with the logistics?
Certainly. So with the diversification of landing points for Japan, it's mostly because for now the existing submarine cable systems are kind of clustered around the Pacific coast close to Tokyo. So this makes for a kind of single point of failure scenario in case things don't go well, or in case our aggressive neighbor decides to be more aggressive. Then that is not the ideal scenario. So back when Prime Minister Kishida was in office, he already saw this as a problem and have poured in the funds, I believe it's $44 million, to help with this route diversification, which is why you see diversification to, for example, Fukuoka. We also have the NTT data intra-Asia cable system that is coming on board.
So this is route diversification?
Yes, which also means that it would touch on different landing points in Japan, just so that it's not so clustered around Tokyo, that you have other landing points like Fukuoka, like Chiba, like other points, like more northern, as you mentioned, like in Hokkaido, so that we do not encounter a huge disaster and just being cut off from any form of communication if things do come to that.
And rerouting cables, or rerouting the data from one damaged cable to another cable, how easy is that to do?
It really depends on how damaged the cable is. So cables, when they are sabotaged, it doesn't mean that they are completely cut off. So it is optical fibers, so maybe some fibers are damaged, but it can still stay within the same system. However, there are also mechanisms that allow you to jump to other systems, which is why we have what I mentioned a little bit before, strategic redundancy. So you don't only have one international submarine cable system. Most countries, most states, they will have at least a dozen, if not more. But for our region in the Asia Pacific, we particularly rely on this form of being connected to the internet because we are so many island nations or peninsula nations as compared to North America or Europe, where there will be a mix of land lines as well.
Can we just delve further into the Yokohama and Southeast Asian or Southeast Asia Indian Ocean region collaboration? What does this give Taiwan access to, and what advantage does this give?
So Taiwan actually, I believe, only announced their inclusion in these two protection zones in February by the government. This means that they can benefit from the pooled resources within these protection zones because, as I mentioned a little bit before, it does not rely on bilateral relations. So no matter how good relations are between Taiwan and Japan, notwithstanding the lack of a formal relationship, they cannot directly access those fleets. It has to be through mechanisms like these. Because Taiwan proportionally is smaller. So it also means that they have less resources to work with, in addition to not being a traditional shipyard heavyweight within the region. So this gives them access to vessels that are available in other countries and protection mechanisms that are already in place. With Taiwan, this is always an issue because they are not included in a lot of the multilateral mechanisms that not only allow the access to resources or protection, but also to the learning process of it, the knowledge sharing and the intelligence sharing part of it, which is why Taiwan has also been establishing Track 1.5 or Track 2 routes for the Taiwanese government to interact with actors that may not directly be from the government of other countries, but still allows for collaboration and knowledge sharing between, say, Quad Framework and Taiwan.
Well, this is also where private enterprises can come in. But before we look at that, I just wanted to understand. So when you say Taiwan cannot benefit from bilateral relations, does that mean, despite Taiwan's proximity to Japan, there can't be some kind of cable sharing agreement between the two?
Of course, Taiwan can benefit in general with a good relationship with Japan, notwithstanding whether it is formal or not. However, specifically, when we talk about cable repair, there are specific international laws that need to be abided by and international mechanisms that are already in place. Therefore, just because Taiwan has a good relationship with Japan, it doesn't mean that they can move up the list of being prioritized in repairs. It has to go through the existing mechanisms and safeguards and how they prioritize these protections and these maintenance and, of course, repair work.
And is there any way that Taiwan and Japan, again, because of their proximity, if Taiwan's cables are severed on one side, is there any way Taiwan can benefit or take advantage of Japan's cable network at the moment? Is that even physically possible or diplomatically possible?
Well, if it's a submarine cable system that connects to Japan but not to Taiwan, it would be difficult. But at the same time, it's not like Taiwan only relies on 5 submarine cable system. As Jason mentioned earlier, there are 24 in total, 14 are international, 10 are inter-island within Taiwan. So there's still plenty to go with if there are 2 or 3 cut. But of course, because Chunghwa Telecoms owns so many of these systems, and they have specific data centers that they prefer to work with in certain jurisdictions. So when it is cut, even if it's 1 or 2, it's felt immediately because services like Line, for example, they will go through very specific submarine cable systems that might be targeted. And therefore, most people will start to feel, oh, why is my internet slower? So that is what is happening. In addition to this, there is also the LEO and MEO satellite route. This has already been explored by the Taiwanese government. I believe that if funds allow, that they will be deploying. Basically, a LEO and MEO is like a low Earth orbit and medium Earth orbit satellites that allow for communications as a contingency, kind of like what Starlink has been doing for Ukraine in the beginning of the war. However, these are not completely replacing submarine cables. Submarine cable systems still have a much larger capability and allows for way faster internet speed, which can allow for not only military or and critical infrastructure connection, but also our daily needs, like your gaming needs or like your online banking app needs.
Very interesting. What other developments are you seeing in this space, particularly when it comes to the security of submarine cables that private enterprises are doing in Japan at the moment that you feel that Taiwan should be collaborating with?
I feel like the biggest space for collaboration between Japan and Taiwan in the commercial world regarding defense is probably on the R&D side. Just because if it goes further than that, this will require a higher level diplomacy, really, which is the sticky point, because Japan and Taiwan, regardless of how close they are or how vocal our prime minister has been, does not have formal relations. So if we roll it back a little bit and stick to private partnerships or R&D partnerships, it is a more possible route to go about it. And because submarine cables, as we said in the beginning of this conversation, is considered critical infrastructure, it does touch on national security. So there are parts of it that cannot be shared completely transparently between these 2 jurisdictions, but there is still plenty of space. For example, developing the monitoring and maintenance as well as minor repair systems that are available. You have examples like the SPICE AUV. You have examples like the DAS, which is the distributed acoustic sensing system, or AI detection that allows for shorter detection times for either naturally caused damage or deliberate sabotage, which helps us minimize the economic impact if for now, for example, the AI system minimizes that detection time from 24 hours to 1 hour. But technology like the SPICE AUV can help actually deploy automatically these robotics systems that will repair minor faults or minor sabotage and damages on its own without us having to deploy a whole vessel and a crew, which minimizes the delay, which is currently at around 6 to 8 weeks, if not more.
Right. So you mentioned the SPICE AUV, and you mentioned some of the projects that are happening in Japan. Is Taiwan getting involved in any of that, or from what you understand, is Taiwan using any of the emerging technology for also specifically for undersea cables, from what you know?
For now, my understanding is it's still mainly in Japan by private companies like Kawasaki. However, I feel like there is space for more collaboration because my understanding is that the Taiwanese government has been looking more into developing Taiwanese shipbuilding capabilities so that they can also have more repair but also cable laying capabilities. If that is the case, why not also pour the money into R&D so that there is another route to go about this track 1.5 or track 2 collaboration between Japan and Taiwan? We see already collaborations like the GCTP, which is the Global Cooperation and Training Frameworks, framework, which brings together already Japan, the UK, Philippines with Taiwan on a track 1.5 level.
Okay.
So for now, Taiwan already has multiple routes to go about track 1.5 exchanges or track 2 exchanges. For example, it has the Global Cooperation and Training Framework in place. I believe the UK joined late last year in 2025. Existing members include, for example, Japan and the Philippines already. This allows Taiwan access to, for example, Quad experts that already know about how to deal with deliberate cable sabotage or have experienced or have looked into this. There is also the framework of risk, RISK, that the Taiwanese government announced back in October. This covers actually the risk mitigation, intelligence sharing, the systemic reform, as well as knowledge building and sharing. This is, of course, track 1.5, where you have academia, you have civil society, and you have governments. But the governments of Taiwan and those jurisdictions with no formal relations with Taiwan would not be in the same room at the same time.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Given how vulnerable so many countries are, particularly that rely on undersea cables, it's amazing how much catch-up we're playing when it comes to this. And one of the areas where there is a lot of catching up to do is the international law. And you've also previously noted how now UNCLOS, the UN laws that govern the seas, is still very inadequate with regards to modern day risks to undersea cables. So what do you think Taiwan and Japan can do, or how should they be lobbying, particularly because Taiwan cannot have a voice in this, to improve the laws or security in undersea cables?
So UNCLOS is a body of law that was written in a time when the internet did not exist. So the most use of submarine cables used to be telegrams. And these laws have largely remained unchanged. So it's not adequate to deal with what we have today, which is the heavy reliance on submarine cables for daily operations, not only just the financial side of things, which of course is important, but also daily how we communicate with each other. Person to person, but also government to people, business to business, business to client, etc. So this makes maritime security of the utmost importance when it comes to how we function as societies and even globally. However, this body of law is just not quite there yet. One of the ways that can help with dealing with gray zone tactics that are targeting Taiwan's submarine cable system is perhaps looking at Article 60 of UNCLOS. This has already been done by jurisdictions like Australia and New Zealand, because as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 categorizations of maritime zones. The territorial waters, and then you have the contiguous zone, the EEZ, and then high water / international waters. If the incident happens outside of territorial waters, meaning if it happens in the EEZ, which is within 200 nautical miles from the coast, or in international waters, for now, the coastal states do not have the authority to go on to foreign vessels and conduct any sort of investigations under UNCLOS. However, Article 60, new interpretations of it have said that actually if submarine cable systems can be defined as like a station or like a point of interest economically, that there can be rules established by coastal states that can help protect it, or at least allow for these coastal states to go on to foreign vessels to conduct the needed investigations if there are deliberate sabotage suspected, because there is a thing called flag of convenience or flags of convenience, which is largely used by malign actors like the Russians and Chinese, meaning the crew or the ship is Chinese funded or they are Chinese. But the flag on the ship is probably from a friendly nation, say Cameroon or Togo, one of the Belt Road Initiative countries that are likely not going to press charges if crew on board of that vessel sabotaged the cables. Therefore, if coastal states like Taiwan cannot board the vessel and the responsibility to prosecute lies on the flag state, they are largely going to go unaccounted for.
Right.
Therefore, in order to work with kind of archaic bodies of law like UNCLOS, we have to find ways to interpret articles that help us fit these laws, the existing legislation, to our modern needs. Because as we know, multilateral organizations and platforms like the UN is not functioning at its highest capacity right now. So in order to deal with such an important risk within a very short time zone, this is what I think would be most pragmatic to be doing.